Breaking news in the Russia investigation. Sarah Sanders interviewed by the special counsel. So we now know that the president's press secretary sat down with Bob Mueller's team late last year. According to Sanders today, quote, "The president urged me, like he has everyone in the administration, to fully cooperate with the special counsel. I was happy to voluntarily sit down with them." That's a pretty misleading thing to say, because the truth is that the White House did not want this interview to happen. CNN has learned White House lawyers would not immediately agree to grant Sanders' interview to the special counsel, so they didn't even want to do it. So voluntarily, all right. Well, even after she did speak to Mueller, Sanders kept talking about the Russia investigation publicly, calling it a witch hunt, never, ever, ever once disclosing that she had been questioned in the investigation.
Certainly the president has voiced his unhappiness from the beginning that this has gone on, this ridiculous witch hunt, for more than 2 years.
Roger Stone last week, Paul Manafort, Michael Cohen, Michael Flynn. Are you concerned, is the president concerned, that as more and more of his associates, former aides, are brought into this investigation, are indicted, plead guilty in this investigation, that this presidency is in danger?
Not at all. In fact, I think nothing could be further from the truth. The more that this goes on, the more and more we see that none of these things have anything to do with the president.
Witch hunt, nothing to do with the president. And yet, the person saying those things was a witness, and she is the president of the United States press secretary. At best, misleading. She was called to an interview with Team Mueller. All of that before she said those things. She kept answering questions without disclosing that. That is really hard to understand. Evan Perez is out front in Washington. And Evan, what could Sanders know that could be of interest to the special counsel?
Well, I think she would know a lot about the public statements that are being made, especially by the White House, especially those made from the podium. Look, I think we've seen in some of the court filings, certainly in the indictments and some of the court action from the special counsel, that they've taken interest in public statements and whether or not public statements are being used, especially ones that are either false or misleading, whether they're being used to put out a narrative, perhaps to guide other witnesses, whether to as a way to obstruct an investigation and to guide witnesses to lie and match their stories with the false or misleading story. So again, that's something we've seen repeatedly from the special counsel. It appears to be one of the legal theories, Aaron, that has been guiding this investigation. So if you're Sarah Sanders, you have made a lot of statements from the podium, and some of them have been misleading, some of them have been false. How did those come about? Those are the questions that special counsel would have been very interested to find out. Were you told by the president to say these things? If you notice, by the way, Aaron, over the course of the past year or so, Sarah Sanders has changed the way she does her job at the podium. In the past, she used to say categorically that something was or wasn't true. Now she says the president says it's not true, or the president says this. I think that's one indication that she's learning that perhaps she's got to be able to say where things are coming from, and they're not coming from her. And I think, again, this tells us a lot about what this investigation has been looking at, and this is part of the obstruction part of this case that the special counsel has been focusing on.
Right. I mean, obviously, she was part of putting out those statements we got about about the statement the president crafted on Air Force One about the meeting in Trump Tower. She was there. She was a part of that. These are all crucial things I know perhaps on the list. All right, Evan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I want to go now to the former Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Harry Sandick, former Assistant Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security under President Obama, Juliette Kayyem, and CNN anchor and Chief National Security Correspondent Jim Sciutto, also the author of the new book, The Shadow War: Inside Russia and China's Secret Operations to Undermine America. Obviously, very relevant expertise for this conversation. Juliette, how important could Sarah Sanders be to Mueller's investigation?
I think significantly important. Look, she's in the room where it happens, right? I mean, let's just not deny this. She's in the room. They're having conversations about how they're going to present whatever bad news has happened that day. She has gone, as we've heard, she's gone from, sort of saying categorically this is true or not true to sort of now invoking Trump. But when you think about the communication strategy, she is it. I also want to say what's really interesting about this is Sarah Sanders had nothing to do with the campaign, right? So she's not really a part of the campaign. So clearly Mueller's interest in her actually has to do with when he's president. So every time she says this has nothing to do with the White House or Trump Trump and as president, that's actually, she knows that's not true because she herself has been interviewed and she wasn't part of any of the shenanigans going on during the campaign.
I mean, Harry, this is what is stunning, right? She says, okay, now she never disclosed it. Now we know. She never disclosed it. And yet, even after she'd been interviewed, we just played her saying this has nothing to do with the president. This is all a witch hunt. Maybe that's her personal opinion on the witch hunt. She knows it has something to do with the president. She is his press secretary.
It's a very tangled web because I would predict that her lawyer told her, don't talk about your interview, don't talk about what you said or what you were asked in public, because that's what a good lawyer would tell their client in an investigation. But her very job involves talking to the public in the largest possible forum almost every day. And so how can
and maintaining their trust in the president and his presidency, which she has undermined.
It seems to be a conflict in her role as press secretary or spokesman for the president.
And Jim, you know, not only that, but as Juliette points out, right, she did not work for the president during the campaign. She works for him now. This does open the door to what exactly Mueller's asking about and the time frame.
I think for folks at home who are having some trouble, maybe some frustration following this long investigation, right? I mean, because you have two strands here. One is, was there actual collusion, conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russia? Was there exchange of information, et cetera? Then the other line that we know is, was there obstruction of justice? And under that umbrella is the question, did this administration, did this president, but also the people working for him, including the White House press secretary, who has a very significant role in communicating to the American people, right? The position of this administration, were they intentionally misleading the American people and therefore members of Congress and therefore the prosecutors in this investigation about the nature of those communications? And I think the fact that Robert Mueller, because Robert Mueller does not waste his time with witnesses, the fact that he spoke to the White House press secretary indicates at least that he's interested in that line of investigation, and it's a reasonable one.
And Juliette, you know, when we talk about Sarah Sanders, we also, of course, know top White House aides have been interviewed by the special counsel in addition to Sarah Sanders, right? John Kelly, former chief of staff, Hope Hicks, Sean Spicer, also senior communications advisors. All of them now have been interviewed, and there could be others that we are not yet aware of. What do you take away from that?
Yeah. So I find this list fascinating because obviously, you know, some of them are from the campaign, some of them crossed over, but these are the names we know, right? I mean, you and I watching TV, getting to know the team, the campaign, the White House. These are the names we know because these are the ones Trump has put before us, and so the fact that they've all been called in is incredibly telling about how close Mueller is to the Oval Office.